Amazing discovery, Undercover CEO reveals the hidden life of a janitor. Transformative Secrets EX. Alex Carter stood in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection of the man who had it all, a high-powered tech CEO, millionaire, and influential voice in the corporate world. Yet, an unsettling hollowness gripped him, a relentless ache that something vital was missing. He returned to the boardroom where numbers danced on screens and profits surged like tidal waves, but beneath the polished gloss lurked a disturbing realization: he knew nothing about the lives of the people upon whom this empire rested. It wasn't just a corporate vision, it was a fortress built on sacrifices of the unseen. He winced at the thought. Would dressing up as a janitor push him into their world? Would it shed light on the complexities veiled behind sterile corporate walls? He chose the name Sam, adopting the uniform and worn-out shoes that would ground his aspirations into unfiltered reality. With each step through the bustling hallways of his skyscraper, he felt liberated yet vulnerable, entering a realm that buzzed with life instead of profit. In these sprawling corridors, Alex, or Sam, encountered Judith, a janitor with a heartwarming smile and a robust spirit. As he listened to her recount tales of juggling bills and juggling dreams in the face of financial strain, he became entangled in an unfamiliar web of resilience that challenged his long-held beliefs. Her infectious laughter masked layers of weariness, and for the first time, he saw the unseen pressure in her eyes, the sacrifices that transformed daily living into a precarious balancing act. "What do you do when the rent goes up?" he asked one day during their shared lunch break. Her eyes sparkled with a fleeting hint of mischief, and she mentioned a puzzle she'd solved, a way to stretch her meager paycheck to make ends meet. Alex couldn't believe it. How had he overlooked such profound wisdom from someone he once deemed invisible? Didn't he, a CEO, once embody that very intelligence? Before he could explore this thought more deeply, the weight of a looming corporate scandal crashed down on him. In his quest for insight, he stumbled upon buried truths, evidence of an insidious scheme by those within his own company, exploiting janitorial staff to line their pockets under the guise of budget cuts. The air in his chest tightened, and he felt the suffocating grip of knowledge that threatened to swallow him whole. Caught in a moral tempest, Alex faced an unthinkable choice. Would he expose this injustice and risk everything he'd built? The whispers of ambition wrestled violently with the voice of conscience. Judith's warmth collided with the cold, calculated world he inhabited, her laughter echoing like a siren call amidst his internal chaos. He could no longer ignore the truth that pulsed alongside his understanding of success. What did it mean if that success came at the price of another's dignity? Just as he prepared to confront the corporate deception that clawed at his sense of morality, Judith sensed his turmoil. "What will you choose when you have everything to lose?" she whispered, the weight of her words crashing down like a tidal wave. Alex's heart raced. Could he really face the board, knowing that his actions would dictate the fate of workers like Judith, the uncelebrated heroes in the shadows? It was a question that would haunt him, intertwining their fates and leaving their future dangling at the edge of uncertainty, igniting the clash between ambition and humanity into a raging storm. The weight of Judith's question pressed upon Alex as he walked away from their lunch, the facade of Sam fading under the harsh fluorescent lights of the office. Each step echoed in his mind, reverberating with the enormity of the choice he faced. The polished floors below him mirrored the unsettling reflection of his internal conflict, a paralyzing tension lingered like a shadow, distorting his once clear vision of success. He retreated to his office, closing the door behind him. The walls, now insurmountable barriers of expectation and ambition, surrounded him. What would the other board members think? His colleagues revered him, he was the embodiment of a triumph-driven society. Yet, here he was, questioning the very foundations of his empire. The world of the janitorial staff was light years away from the sleek, glass fortress he'd built, yet Judith's laughter and her resilience became an echo that persisted, drawing him closer to a precipice he wasn't sure he was ready to approach. Alex sank into his chair, staring at the screen before him. The reports showcasing rising profits blinked insistently, but the numbers felt empty, void of responsibly earned victories. He needed clarity. With a swift decision, he flipped his laptop open, combing through documents about corporate ethics, labor practices, and the very bylaws he had once navigated without question. Information flowed like a torrent, revealing the stark contrasts between theory and reality. In this windstorm of data, he stumbled upon a survey filled out by employees, an exercise in anonymity compromised by his own ignorance. The complaints articulated were stark, raw, and piercing: missing paychecks, overburdening overtime, yet not a whisper of a solution. The intention of the survey was clear: to foster a dialogue. Somehow, it went unheard inside the echoing halls of corporate strategy. The deeper he delved, the more palpable the injustice became. Alex realized that Judith and her colleagues weren't just names cleaning the corridors, they were voices muted by the clattering of keyboards and busy conversations about growth. He envisioned asking for a meeting with the board to discuss changes, improvements, a voice for those who had been overlooked. His resolve gathered weight, however, it was intertwined with a fear of aftermath, a fear that clawed at the edges of his ambition. Suddenly, the notion of Sam began to meld with Alex, the man who prided himself on visions of growth, paradoxically plotting to undermine everything he had built. He could alleviate his guilt by revealing the truth, yet it could force him back into the shadows. The stakes were higher than a mere career, they involved lives, dreams, and dignity. As he sat there, the stark realization washed over him: someone had to confront this injustice, and that someone could only be him. Without a second thought, Alex made a choice. The reality of his empire compelled him to dismantle the systems that had created it. The character of Sam would no longer just be a disguise, it was a catalyst for profound change. With a newfound determination fueling his every keystroke, Alex drafted an email to his executive team, summarizing evidence of the exploitation, invoking both accountability and a call to action. The urgency buzzed in the air, a ticking clock that dared him to seal his fate. Just before pressing send, he paused. But the storm within him had only begun to brew. What backlash awaited him? Would the revelation tear apart the very fabric of his relationships with colleagues and stakeholders? The time had come to face the consequences of his choices, but it was no longer just a job at stake, it was a reckoning that loomed large. Alex took a breath, his finger hovering over the send button, the uncertainty palpable. Would he emerge as a leader advocating for equity, or would he step back into the comfort of silence? With a surge of adrenaline pushing him forward, he pressed the button, sending not just an email, but a ripple through the structure of his empire. Outside his office, life continued. Without realizing, the shift set in motion. The impact of his decision would not only change the course of his corporate ladder but also redefine what success truly meant for him. The waiting game had begun, but one certainty loomed larger than the rest: consequences, whether daunting or transformative, were on the horizon. The clock on the wall ticked methodically as Alex sat at his desk, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over the documents spread across the surface. With each passing minute, the reality of his decision loomed heavier. The tension was no longer just within him, it filled the entire office, expanding and contracting like the very air he breathed. 1,000 questions danced in his mind, each more confounding than the last. What would he face when the board read his email? Would they regard him as a traitor to the corporation or an innovator advocating change? His heart raced. This was not merely an email, it was a declaration, a challenge to the very system he had upheld for years. He recalled the image of Judith, her laughter and tenacity piercing through the corporate veil he had held up for so long. Pursuing justice for those whose voices had been silenced felt like standing on the edge of an abyss. Would he leap, or step back? Resolutely, he leaned forward, his fingers poised over the keyboard, ready to draft a follow-up email detailing a plan for an all-hands meeting to discuss restructuring labor practices and implementing genuine dialogue. But then doubt crept in, weaving through his thoughts like a snake. What if they harnessed their anger against him? What if his plea for ethics would disrupt the very flow of profitability they so vigorously defended? Deciding that he needed to discuss this further before presenting it to the board, Alex stood and grabbed his coat, his mind racing with the potential ramifications of his actions. He walked through the office, murmurs of businesslike banter surrounding him like a blanket. Each face he passed felt like a mirror, reflecting potential allies or imminent adversaries. Alex paused by the break room, where employees unwound during their sparse moments of respite. Glancing inside, he spotted Judith engaged in conversation, her spirit infectious even from a distance. His heart sank at the thought of her struggles, her personal battles hidden behind the facade of cheerful service. Suddenly, the decision to act felt more significant than job security or corporate hierarchy. It was time to confront the roots of the problem head-on. "Judith," he called softly as he stepped inside, a mixture of apprehension and resolve settling within. She turned, her bright eyes conveying surprise and then guarded curiosity. "Can I talk to you for a second?" The other employees resumed their conversations as he ushered Judith to a quieter corner. "What's up, Alex?" she asked, crossing her arms, skepticism etched into her features. "I'm shifting things around, at work," he began, struggling to find the words. "I sent an email to the board about the conditions for employees. It's time for change, and I think we can push for better treatment." Judith studied him, disbelief mingled with cautious hope. "You're serious? After everything?" "Yes. I'm ready to stand up for all of us." Alex felt a surge of conviction with each word. "But I could use your insight. I want the changes to be meaningful." Hope flickered in her eyes, yet fear lingered. "It won't be easy, Alex. There are people who will fight back. This is their territory. But it's our lives. I can't sit back and watch anymore," he replied, feeling an unexpected sense of urgency coursing through him. "I'd never forgive myself." Judith considered him, the gears visibly turning in her mind. "Okay," she said finally, determination replacing hesitation. "But you must be ready for their wrath. They won't let this go without a fight." "Yes, I'll prepare myself," he affirmed, fortifying himself with her acknowledgement. As they devised their plan, Alex realized that this was not just about injustice, it was an awakening. Their futures were intertwined, and together they might ignite the catalyst for something greater. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a notification, breaking the moment. A subject line flashed across the screen. The board had replied. His pulse quickened, anticipation mingled with fear. Had he truly ignited a revolution, or was the fire destined to be snuffed out? With Judith still by his side, he opened the email. The words before him seemed inconsequential compared to the whirlwind of emotions swirling within. Whatever they say, he thought, it won't be the end. It's only the beginning. As he stared at the screen, a pit clawed at his stomach. The time for reckoning had arrived, and he was about to face an undeniable truth. The corporate fortress he once revered was beginning to crack, and this was just the start. What would the board have to say, and could they be swayed? The storm was approaching, and Alex's heart raced not from fear, but with the exhilaration of change on the horizon. The email from the board seemed innocuous at first, a single line that commanded immediate attention. "We request a meeting to discuss your recent communication." Alex stared at the screen, feeling his heart pound as he considered the implications. The time for hesitance was over, now he had to act. "I guess we're in the game now," he said to Judith, trying to mask the knot twisting in his stomach. "They want to meet. What do I say?" "Led with your concerns," she replied, her voice steady but still tinged with caution. "But remember, they'll be looking for weakness. You can't show doubt." He nodded, resolve hardening like steel inside him. This required a careful strategy, but after years of compliance, Alex found himself grappling with a newfound clarity. The stakes had shifted not just for himself, but for everyone he aimed to advocate for. Whatever the outcome, he had stepped beyond the confines of the familiar corporate game. The hours that followed were a blur of planning. Each strategy session with Judith peeled back layers of his preparation. Issues of employee treatment, workers' rights, and profit margins morphed into a mosaic of potential arguments, each more powerful than the last. With each discussion, he discovered an unexpected depth to his own passion. He had often shied away from confrontation, but now he was on the brink of a turnabout. Days rolled into an avalanche of anxiety as the scheduled meeting loomed closer. The moment he had circumvented for so long was finally here face to face with the board members who wielded influence like a weapon. He recalled their expressions from meetings past, cold and calculating. What would they think of him now, this man who dared to challenge the status quo? The thought made him tremble, yet a flicker of exhilaration thrummed beneath. The meeting room was stark, the long table intimidating. He took his seat among the imposing figures that dominated the board. Each one appeared to scrutinize him, calculating their next move. A relentless pulse throbbed in his temples as he recalled Judith's advice: project confidence. He opened the meeting by sharing a personal story, a choice he hadn't anticipated making. He related Judith's experiences, the silent burdens she carried, and how they were mirrored in the lives of countless employees. The board members listened, a tinge of surprise animating their featureless faces. As he painted vivid pictures of real implications behind corporate policies, their skepticism began to crack, even if incrementally. "What you're suggesting is radical," the CEO interrupted. "Do you realize the risk involved?" "Risk?" "Yes," Alex answered, his voice steady. "But the real danger lies in doing nothing. It's not just about saving costs, it's about saving lives, dignity. These employees matter, and when morale is low, every drop in productivity resonates across the company." The tension in the room thickened, the air electric with anticipation. He couldn't tell if they were grappling with newfound realization or simply condescending to his audacity. He pressed on, presenting his proposal for restructuring employee relationships. The nervous energy within him surged, sparking him with determination. Suddenly, one of the board members leaned forward, their forms casting a long shadow over his confidence. "And if we decline your proposals? What then, Alex? What is your plan?" Alex swallowed hard, his resolve yet unbroken. "Then I will continue raising awareness. I won't stop at this table, and I will use every resource available to amplify our voices. I no longer fear the fallout. This is about something larger than all of us." Silence encased the room like a blanket, every member visibly taken aback. They were no longer the unyielding adversaries, they were agents of uncertainty, forced to acknowledge the fervor of the truth being laid bare before them. As the minutes passed after his bold declaration, Alex felt a shift. Perhaps it was the beginning of something transformative, not just for the company but for himself as well. He realized that by confronting them, he was also confronting the parts of himself that had long been dormant. The fight was just beginning. But as the meeting drew to a close, uncertainty loomed in the distances of his mind. What would happen next? Would they take a step towards reform, or would they retaliate with calculated silence? With a sense of unexpected calm settling within him, he braced himself for the answers that awaited on the other side of this confrontation, forging a path where none existed before. The battle was not over, and as he gathered his things to leave the meeting, a question nagged persistently in the back of his mind: what secrets did the reckoning hold? A week passed since the tumultuous meeting, and Alex found himself steeped in a haze of anticipation. The board had yet to respond, which fueled a cycle of hope and dread that tightened his chest. Each day felt like an eternity as he waited for their verdict. Judith kept a steady presence by his side, her unwavering support a source of comfort, yet his anxiety simmered just below the surface. Reflecting on the meeting, Alex replayed every detail in his mind, retracing the way each board member's face had shifted in reaction to his words. He had surprised them, however slightly, and that realization ignited a flicker of belief within him. If he could influence them even minimally, perhaps he could propel further change. He had crossed a threshold, one that made him conscious of the power of his voice. He had fought not just for recognition but for the revival of lost courage within himself. Driven by this awakening, he set out to refine his proposals, focusing on actionable change rather than abstract idealism. He pored over research on employee engagement and productivity, highlighting statistical evidence that linked a satisfied workforce to financial gains. With each new piece of information, he felt his confidence bolstering, a tangible sense of purpose ignited within him. He wasn't merely pushing for change, he was pioneering a paradigm shift, and that felt monumental. Yet doubt loomed steadily. What if the board dismissed him entirely? Would his passion be enough to sway opinions hardened by years of tradition? Conferencing with Judith, he attracted clarity from her experience and perspective. If this is to be your fight, then make it personal, she urged while reviewing his notes. These aren't just statistics, they're stories. Find the heart behind each number. Inspired, he sought narrations from employees at various levels of the company, gathering insights that went beyond data. Conversations brought forth narratives that echoed with pain and triumph, weaving a rich tapestry of human experience in the corporate landscape. It was impassioned testimonials that would breathe life into his proposal. Employees weren't merely numbers, they were the lifeblood of the organization. During this process of discovery, Alex unearthed something deeper within himself, an ability to connect and empathize like never before. He started to see beyond corporate jargon and emerged as a genuine advocate for his peers. This emotional engagement shifted his mindset. It wasn't solely about improving corporate strategies, but about fostering human connections that could drive lasting change. As he prepared to present his refined proposals to the board, Alex's pulse quickened at the thought of stepping before them again. Would they be receptive to his newly adapted message? Would he have the courage to stand firm for those he had come to represent? He felt the weight of responsibility. This was not simply another pitch, this was a testament to the vibrant humanity within the walls of their sterile boardroom. On the day of the follow-up meeting, a wave of clammy nerves coursed through him. He had decided to share not just statistically supported arguments but also touched upon the individual stories that showcased the empathy behind his mission. He had written down the main points but knew that once in front of the board, he would rely on instinct and connection. Stepping into the meeting room, he resolved to let go of the fear that had clouded his presence before. As he took his seat, he caught the eyes of his audience, familiar yet enigmatic. This was the moment to reveal not just his plans, but his fervor. "Thank you for meeting again," Alex began, feeling the strength of his voice fill the space. He paused, searching for words that could bridge the gap between comfort and challenge. But before he could dive deeper into his presentation, the chairman of the board interjected. "Before we hear your updated proposals, Alex, we have a few concerns we need to address first." The air crackled with tension. His heart sunk momentarily, every potential roadblock surged dread through him. But then another realization struck: his path had led him here, and he was ready to confront whatever challenges the board had in store. Perhaps this was the moment he would truly find out what he was capable of, and that alone was worth the price of admission. The stakes had risen, and now more than ever, Alex felt the weight of the moment. Would he embrace this critical juncture, or would fear stifle his resolve? As he prepared to respond, one unsettling thought took root: what if this confrontation would lead not just to corporate changes, but to revelations about truths he had yet to uncover within himself? The chairman's gaze bore down on Alex, a mix of curiosity and skepticism threading through his expression. It was an unmistakable power play, an attempt to rattle him. But Alex had come too far to let his hard-won confidence unravel. He clenched his fists beneath the table, grounding himself. This was not just about the presentation, it was about his journey and the truths revealed along the way. "Thank you, Chairman," Alex replied, his voice steadied by deeper resolve. "I appreciate your willingness to address concerns first." He felt the room shift slightly as he navigated his response, every word carefully sculpted to convey both assurance and determination. "I hope to address them transparently. Everything I've proposed stems from genuine stories shared by our team." The board members exchanged glances, and Alex noted the furrowing of brows. He couldn't help but wonder if they had ever considered the humanity behind the numbers. Perhaps this was the first time in years someone had attempted to intertwine data with individual experiences. He took a breath, knowing the next moments would mark a crucial pivot, not only in this meeting but in his own growth. "Can you elaborate on why you believe these personal stories have any real place in our corporate strategy?" One board member interrupted, her skepticism palpable. Alex could feel the challenge hanging heavily in the air. Certainly. These stories aren't just anecdotal, they represent a collective voice within our organization. For instance, when I spoke to Mary from accounting, she reflected on how employee recognition sparked her motivation and subsequently increased her productivity. As he spoke, something within him shifted. His past self might have just deferred to the board's authority, but now, Alex stood firm, emboldened by the knowledge he had gathered. When employees feel valued, it fosters commitment. We cannot afford to ignore this connection. It has long-term impacts on retention and overall company morale, as well as our bottom line. Gradually, he observed a flicker of intrigue replace the initial skepticism on some faces. It was subtle, perhaps imperceptible to others, but it reinforced his belief that he was on the right path. What specifically are you suggesting we change? Another member queried, arms crossed tightly, eyes narrowed in suspicion. Alex sensed a battle brewing, yet his internal landscape felt clearer than it ever had. I propose a structured employee recognition program backed by ongoing training for team leaders to identify and celebrate achievements effectively. This grows a culture of appreciation while also aligning with our performance metrics. The wave of silence that enveloped the room grew heavier. Every sound felt amplified: the clicking of pens, the rustle of papers. Alex's heart drummed in his chest, urging him to press on. I also want to implement regular feedback forums that empower employees to share their insights and suggestions openly. Rather than being a top-down operation, let us create a space where voices at all levels can contribute to our strategies. He knew he was risking a great deal, not only in terms of perceived failure but also his newfound confidence. Would this initiative lead to meaningful change, or would he merely be a temporary blip on the board's radar? Your approach sounds ambitious, the chairman remarked, his tone softened but still questioning. But how do you plan to engage those who traditionally avoided speaking up? Alex resolved to reveal more of himself. This wasn't just a tactical question, it was a call for authenticity. I will lead by example. I've realized that embracing vulnerability creates a stronger foundation for teamwork. I want to share my story, how I found my voice against adversity, to inspire others to do the same. He felt a ripple among the board members, a shift that hinted at connection. Yet doubt danced on the fringes of his consciousness. Would a mere story resonate with these seasoned professionals, hardened by years in the corporate trenches? Even as they deliberated his proposals. Efficacy, Alex felt a surge of clarity. This was not merely a presentation but a defiance of the disconnect prevalent in business culture. He wouldn't just be another executive aiming for the usual targets, he was igniting a movement within himself and, potentially, within the organization. But just as resolve took hold, the chairman interjected again, we need more than just anecdotes, Alex. We need measurable results to back up your vision. That dangerous mix of fear and determination clawed at him again, an ever-present reminder of the stakes involved. But what if this confrontation wasn't just leading to professional growth? What if it unraveled truths that would redefine who Alex was as a leader, as a person? Then let us explore those measurements together, he countered, confidence bubbling beneath his anxiety. Let us define success on both an emotional and a quantitative level. As the space filled with muted speculation, Alex silently questioned whether he was prepared to dive deeper into the unknown, both personally and professionally. But in that moment, he knew he had to discover just how far he could push the boundaries of his own potential. The atmosphere thickened with possibility and tension. Facing this crossroads, one thought emerged in stark vulnerability: was he ready to confront the revelations that lay just beyond the boardroom walls? The boardroom remained charged with unspoken tension as Alex considered the implications of his words. The silent consternation that hung in the air felt palpable, yet, beneath his unease, he could sense a budding recognition among the members. For the first time, they were confronted with a radical departure from the status quo. Alex, the chairman's voice sliced through the atmosphere, firm yet musing. I'll play devil's advocate and ask, what happens if these emotional appeals fall flat? What do you have in place to handle disillusionment if these proposed changes do not yield immediate results? The question landed hard, triggering a visceral response in Alex. A part of him wanted to seize on the chairman's perception, to argue back that business was too often driven by cold statistics, dismissing the human element entirely. But this wasn't the moment for a defensive stance, this was an opportunity to dig deeper. Without the bolster of time to concoct an elaborate retort, Alex found himself grasping for a rebuttal that reflected both his knowledge and the nuances of his experience. "I understand the concern," Alex began, his tone calm yet assertive. "But this isn't merely about immediate satisfaction. It's about planting seeds for long-term engagement. Should challenges arise, we will have the framework for open conversations where we can not only reassess but evolve." The word struck a chord of authenticity. Alex felt a flicker of conviction igniting within him. He could facilitate a process that valued emotional intelligence as much as it did quarterly reports. At that moment, he was no longer just a presenter, he was a custodian of change. Still, doubt griped at the edges of his thoughts. Who was he, really, to think he could instigate such a profound shift? His experience in product management hadn't exactly prepared him for this kind of leadership challenge. Yet what he had learned through the struggles in his own life, the lessons extracted from vulnerability, failure, and resilience, could be a beacon for others. Encouraged by this realization, Alex continued, "And when I mentioned sharing my story, I meant it as a catalyst for courage. If leaders exemplify vulnerability, they create space for honest communication. Thus, when failures happen we navigate those struggles together instead of playing the blame game." He noticed several nodding heads. This conceptual pivot was taking root. The barriers set by years of rigid hierarchy were slowly breaking down. Suddenly, another board member, previously silent, chimed in, "What if those leaders can't share their own struggles? What if it's embedded in the corporate culture not to show weakness?" A silence filled the vacuum left by her inquiry. Alex felt the immensity of her point loom ominously overhead. His initial defensiveness slipped away, replaced by a craving for clarity. The shadows of his own insecurities flashed before him, memories of hesitation in his own past preventing him from being fully transparent. Then it becomes our responsibility to foster an environment where vulnerability is seen as strength, Alex found himself declaring, pushing through his insecurities. "If we build a foundation of mutual support, I believe we can redefine what success looks like. We're not falling, we're growing." His words hung over the meeting, charged with both a challenge and an invitation. This conversation was becoming an act of defiance against the norms that had stifled creativity and morale for far too long. The chairman shifted in his seat, visibly recalibrating his approach. "You seem passionately invested in this, Alex. But how can we ensure this isn't just another passing trend?" A storm of thoughts brewed inside him. He realized they were wrestling not only with the idea of employee engagement but also with the possibility of reimagining what it meant to lead. He had touched on something significantly transformative. The notion ignited a fire of urgency within him. "If we truly commit," he responded, galvanizing his words, "this program must be nurtured and reviewed. Success indicators should adapt alongside employee sentiment. Let us set up an accountability framework." He could feel the board's collective scrutiny sharpen. The stakes felt momentous. This was no mere presentation anymore. It was an intangible crossroads of internal philosophies colliding, one that would surely ripple outward from this moment. As the meeting progressed, Alex felt a sense of brewing resolve within him. Each challenge prompted self-discovery, revealing hidden competencies he had not yet explored. What he lacked in traditional authority, he could make up for with unwavering conviction. But just when he thought the tide was turning in his favor, one final voice emerged against him. "If you're so committed to this, why should we trust that you, of all people, could be the one to oversee such a sweeping change?" In the remnants of his adrenaline, that single challenge heralded an impending clash. It was a test not just of his vision, but of who he had become. The air thickened again, Alex's heart raced in sync with the intensifying stakes. With fragile determination, he whispered to himself, "This is my moment to prove I'm more than just an idea. As fatigue and exhilaration collided within him, he understood this was the beginning of a much larger journey, a discovery of how far he could develop not just this initiative but himself as a leader, as an individual. What would become of him as he fought to prove his worth in this unforgiving arena? Would the very essence of his identity evolve under the weight of expectation? The answer loomed, dread and exhilaration marinated within him as he faced the critical moment. How far would he have to stretch to redefine not only his career but his legacy? As the echo of the question lingered in the room, Alex's breathing quickened. He felt the weight of the board members' gazes like a spotlight shining down on him, amplifying his self-doubt. Yet, in that moment of pressure, he sensed an awakening, his resolve crystallized, prompting him to lean into the discomfort rather than shy away from it. This is not just about me proving myself, it's about showcasing a new paradigm, he began, each word carrying the weight of his earnestness. Trust is built through transparency, both in our leadership and among our workforce. I'm not here merely as a candidate for overseeing change. I'm here as someone who believes in the possibility of genuine transformation. The chairman's eyes narrowed slightly at Alex's unabashed assertion, as if weighing the gravity of his commitment. Alex pressed forward, determined to confront their skepticism with fire rather than retreat. I understand the cultural constraints you've mentioned. I've felt their impact myself. But if we don't acknowledge and tackle these perceived weaknesses, we merely perpetuate a cycle of fear that alienates our team. He noticed some nodding in support, but the boardroom atmosphere remained charged with scrutiny. The moment felt pivotal. Failure was a tangible specter floating just beyond his reach. In dealing with self-doubt, Alex began to reflect on the times he had fallen short in his life. Those memories were powerful motivators, urging him to redefine his identity not through setbacks, but through resilience. I have shared my own challenges and failures, and I will continue to do so, Alex insisted, his voice finding a steadiness he hadn't expected. It's not merely about leading a program, it's about embodying the change we want to see within our organization. When leaders share their experiences, they humanize their roles, inviting everyone to join in the narrative of growth. The energy in the room shifted slightly. The initial challenge was beginning to transform into a conversation, a dialogue perhaps. He noticed the hesitance in several expressions turn tentative inquiries, a good sign that they were contemplating his message rather than dismissing him altogether. But the chairman remained unconvinced, leaning forward, hands tented beneath his chin. Intention without action leads nowhere, Alex. You must show us not only that you understand this shift but how you intend to implement it effectively. Alex took a deep breath, the air in his lungs emboldening him with new possibilities. We need to start with real, actionable steps. Establish regular feedback loops where employees can voice their concerns and suggestions without fear of retribution. We can initiate workshops that blend leadership training with emotional intelligence development. Above all, we need to recognize and celebrate vulnerability as a strength, not an attribute to be masked. A low murmur circulated among the board members, a mix of curiosity and contemplation. While uncertainty still rested on the shoulders of many, he could sense the spark of interest emerging. Each moment of affirmation fueled his confidence, yet the flames of doubt still flickered in the corner of his mind. Would they truly accept this shift? Could he truly facilitate such an expansive redesign of their corporate culture? With newfound determination, Alex continued, let us put our commitment to the test. I propose a pilot program where I lead small focus groups to gather insights over the next quarter. That could serve as our initial dip into vulnerability as a core value. If it falls short on any level, I welcome your critique and a re-evaluation of my capabilities. He could hear the inkling of approval, but it was still far from certainty. The chairman's silence was unnerving, the board's response loomed like a dark cloud overhead. With each tick of the clock, Alex felt a compulsion to reassure himself. This presentation was more than a professional engagement, it was a confrontation of his identity, the embodiment of the leader he aspired to become. As he managed a moment of silence, he realized that he was standing on the precipice of change not just within the company, but for himself. Each challenge reaffirmed the tenacity lying dormant within him, yet the lingering question remained, What if his vision of vulnerability fell flat? Was it feasible to inspire transformation through emotional connection in a traditionally stoic environment? Just then, as Alex prepared for the anticipated response, a sudden voice broke across the tension. If we're choosing to invest in this direction, are you willing to come under scrutiny yourself, Alex? What are you prepared to reveal? The stakes had escalated, a new layer of challenge sunk into the atmosphere. How could he fulfill the promise of honesty while navigating the vulnerability of his own story? Would he be brave enough to lay bare his past to help others uncover their potential? As he grappled with that reality, the meeting became not just a test of his professional aspirations but an exploration of authentic leadership. How far would he need to stretch the limits of his own comfort to become effective in this transformative role? The very essence of his journey surged toward an inevitable confrontation. What was he truly willing to expose in the quest for progress? Would he rise to the occasion, or would the pressure ultimately shatter him? As the question hung in the air, Alex's heart raced, a torrent of thoughts flooding his mind. The board's expectations bore down on him like a weight he could scarcely fathom. He couldn't ignore the implications of the scrutiny aimed at him. This was not merely professional evaluation, it was a demand for authenticity. Are you prepared to reveal the struggles that shaped your journey? The voice echoed like a challenge, demanding not only his professional acumen but also a sharing of his personal landscape. Alex's pulse quickened as realization struck him. Leaning into vulnerability could be the very foundation of the change he sought to instill within the company. In that moment, a flicker of determination ignited. To lead authentically required him to shed the armor of pretense, to embrace his imperfections as relevant markers on his path. He shifted his weight, steeling himself. What I can share is not just a past of successes but also failures that molded my understanding of resilience. To be a leader is not to be infallible, it is to rise from our falls. The room fell silent. He sensed the board members shifting, contemplating this unexpected vulnerability. Yet a question loomed larger than before: what specific narratives would he choose to reveal that would resonate? Alex began to recall moments from his past, the time he had struggled in his first managerial role, overwhelmed by the challenges of personnel management and high expectations. His voice took on a reflective tone. In my early career, I made decisions based on principles of authority rather than collaboration. It was a lesson learned the hard way, watching my team fracture as fear overtook our dynamics. Losing that engagement crystallized my belief that openness breeds productivity. As he spoke, he felt something shift inside him, a burgeoning sense of empowerment driven not by overt success but by the lessons learned in vulnerability. Alex's commitment began to solidify. It was as if each word pulled more of himself into the light. His truth, once shrouded in shame, morphed into a gateway for connection. After a brief pause, the chairman's gaze remained discerning, but the rigidity in his posture hinted at stirring intrigue. So, tell us, Alex, he asked, his voice calm but probing, are you suggesting we adopt a culture predicated on sharing personal shortfalls? How would this impact our efficiency? Transparency doesn't discard productivity, Alex replied steadily. It cultivates innovation. When employees face obstacles, they need to feel safe to voice their struggles. A culture of shared vulnerability transforms fear into engagement, fostering a workforce willing to collaborate and think creatively. Nods were exchanged while the murmur of approval escalated, but the threat of doubt still lingered. Would the board embrace this paradigm shift? Alex pressed on, recognizing that every moment in this meeting represented a step toward dismantling traditional barriers both for him and the company. Yet, with an undeniable awareness of the stakes, he decided to reveal even more, his voice gaining momentum. I've experienced heartbreak in not being transparent, in failing to ask for help, especially when I faced burnout in my last project. I believe that as a leader, I needed to be strong and unwavering. In doing so, I isolated myself from my team and eroded trust. The chairman leaned forward, intrigued, while others engaged in hushed conversation. Alex felt a sense of liberation as he continued, in truth, sharing these vulnerabilities creates a pathway to mentorship and growth. If I am brave enough to display my struggles, it allows my team the same privilege. But as he prepared to conclude, a sudden fear rushed through him. Would exposing his past strengths and weaknesses undermine his credibility? Could he be successful in revamping a corporate culture that had thrived on stoicism? The room held its breath, anticipation palpable in the air. A voice broke through the tension again, offering a new hook into the unfolding drama. What if, instead of leading by storytelling, you facilitate workshops where you guide others to tell their stories? Would you be willing to make yourself vulnerable again, not just in sharing your narrative but in giving others the platform to reveal theirs? Suddenly, Alex felt the landscape of his professional journey shifting once again. Was it possible to recalibrate the balance of sharing power in this uncharted territory? The possibility of facilitating connection, sharing stories, presented both a daunting challenge and an exhilarating opportunity. Questions flooded his mind. Could he create an environment where everyone felt brave enough to open up? Would he truly be prepared to step back and amplify others' voices at his own risk? As the board members exchanged glances, Alex realized he stood at another critical juncture. Embracing vulnerability meant risking deeper scrutiny, yet it also represented the potential for transformative growth not only for himself but for the entire organization. The potential backlash lingered, inviting thoughts of retribution should his strategy fail. Could this practical sharing of vulnerability usher him into the role of a leader who not only inspired but ignited change? Would he risk it all to discover answers to these profound questions? The next chapter loomed before him, filled with the mysterious allure of unseen possibilities and the challenge of unveiling more profound truths. The culmination of Alex Carter's transformative journey coalesced into a defining moment during the soul-stirring meeting with the board. Facing his critics, he stood firmly, emboldened and resolute. He had taken the plunge to reveal not just statistics but the raw, powerful stories that intertwined with humanity in their organization. The air buzzed with tension and anticipation as he grasped the enormity of his mission. He had fought tirelessly to anchor his commitment to fostering a culture of openness. This was more than a corporate initiative, it was a reflection of who he had chosen to become. In a moment of clarity, conciseness flowed from his lips. What if I could facilitate workshops that allow every employee to share their own journey? Transforming our corporation into a space where vulnerability is valued rather than shunned? Let us reshape our perception of leadership not as authority figures who hold the reins but as nurturers who foster blossoming ideas from our teams. As his words hung in the air, he observed a palpable shift among the board members. Curiosity mingled with caution. Perhaps it was the vulnerability he had modeled, or the very notion of human connection that stirred something within each of them. The chairman considered the proposal, his practiced expression veiled with contemplation. And if we are to pursue this? What outcomes can we anticipate, Alex? Feeling a mix of adrenaline and assuredness, Alex dove deeper into his vision. By creating this platform, we'll not only empower employees but dismantle the walls breeding disengagement. These workshops will generate empathy, collaboration, and innovation, which translates into improved productivity. The echoes of his own struggles flooded his mind, propelling him forward. He continued, our people want to be heard, they want to share their victories and vulnerabilities. When they do, we will build a company culture that embraces shared responsibility, leading us to growth like we've never experienced before. At that moment, Alex felt not only his own transformation but the stirring of change rippling across the room. The board appeared engaged, considering the avenues he had opened. This felt monumental. He wasn't just proposing an initiative, he was redefining the very ethos of their enterprise. But then the chairman's next question cut through the enthusiasm. And what if these workshops don't yield immediate results? How can we assure ourselves that this isn't a transient vision? Understanding the stakes, Alex seized the moment. Results won't appear overnight, he asserted steadily. However, with continuous feedback and an openness to adapt, we can measure engagement, morale, and productivity through tangible metrics. We'll track the impact of shared narratives on our journey from fear to empowerment. Nods of understanding flickered around the room, and he could sense the tension waning. In that moment, Alex realized the journey he had embarked on was about building bridges, not just at the corporate level but also within himself. He was emerging as a leader, no longer defined merely by his title but by the experiences he had embraced and the insights he had gained. The dialogue continued, invigorated by a newfound camaraderie. They began discussing potential timelines, actions, and accountability measures. The very structure of their meeting evolved from skepticism to embracing collaboration. Conversations turned toward the potential impact of implementing the workshops he had proposed. Alex felt a swell of pride as he articulated the path ahead. With each suggestion from the board, he witnessed the markers of transition not only in policies but also in perspectives. They were no longer the detached figures he had known, they began to mirror his passion for elevating those within their organization. As the meeting concluded, the chairman stood, addressing the room. Let us commit to a pilot program. Explore Alex's vision, monitor outcomes, and prepare to adapt based on employee engagement. The gravity of their decision permeated the air, and Alex's heart raced. This was a monumental step. In the weeks that followed, Alex's world transformed. The pilot workshops took shape, creating a vibrant atmosphere filled with trust across the organization. Employees voiced their concerns, shared their stories, and broke free from the shackles of silence that had once confined them. The workshops became a conduit for open dialogue, reliable feedback, and shared strength among colleagues, reshaping the culture from the roots up. Through this profound experience, Alex discovered unshakable confidence within himself. He had proven capable of initiating change, not just advocating it superficially. His realization was hauntingly clear: filling the gaps of connection within the corporate realm would pay dividends immeasurable not only for profit margins but for the very relationships that sustained their work. The growth he had undergone transcended mere professional advancement, it became his identity. Alex had emerged as a leader equipped with empathy and courage, unafraid to confront vulnerabilities not just in himself but in others. He stood tall, reflecting on how he had conquered the very insecurities that once paralyzed him. In moments of quiet reflection, he would often think of Judith, a spark igniting through her wisdom, reminding him of the importance of acknowledging the unseen. Their paths had intertwined, and each had become a catalyst for the other's evolution. The organization thrived, driven by the emotional connection that enriched its workforce not as a mere corporation but as a community of individuals engaged with purpose. Employees spoke not just of profit but of fulfillment, camaraderie, and growth intertwined with their productivity. Alex Carter had metamorphosed from a driven CEO to a compassionate leader, and this journey of transformation would, in time, change the very landscape of how corporate America defined success. As he embarked on what became a new era under his leadership, he knew deep down that this was just the beginning. The world began to stir beyond the confines of glass walls, and Alex realized this journey had given birth to even greater aspirations. The fabric of corporate culture began to stretch and evolve, and every heartbeat within it uniquely resonated, too profound to ignore. He had finally stepped into his power, fulfilling a journey that not only changed him but transformed opportunities for countless others. Now, as you've traversed this emotional tale of growth and transformation, subscribe immediately to this channel to not miss the next exclusive stories that redefine success. Leave a like now to support the algorithm, and don't forget to comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.